So the other day, I had to go to a church/facility that did drug and alcohol rehab for people struggling with that. Now at this church, I saw people speaking in tongues, telling me that demons are real, and asking God to have Jesus touch my heart. So because of that, I decided even though there's plenty of content along this line out there, counter-apologetics is always a worthwhile subject to tackle. So this time I decided to take on a particular apologist that I find particularly disingenuous and amoral. So we're going to be taking a look at that video today.
Frederick Nietzsche was a powerful atheist. He's a guy that coined the term God is dead. He's a guy that wrote the book The Antichrist. This guy was a robust, powerful atheist who brought forth arguments. His arguments ultimately fail and they're bad ideas, but at least he tried, unlike some of the modern new atheists who say, well, you know what, I want to have a weak form of atheism, a silly form of atheism, just say atheism is just a lack of belief in any God or gods.
Holy shit, 22 seconds in past the intro and already the guy clearly doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. So first and foremost, atheism is a lack of belief in God. So first and foremost, atheism is a lack of belief in God. That's it. You can try and give it a spectrum of strong versus weak atheism, but the fact remains that if you don't believe in God, then you're an atheist. The knowledge that God does not exist would be Gnosticism versus agnosticism, and that is an entirely different question than whether or not a person believes in God. Now, Nietzsche himself definitely did not believe in God, but Nietzsche himself did not believe in God. That being said, however, his statement that God is dead was a lamentation, not a proclamation or or a joviation of some kind or another. In the original one-page essay that he brought about this comment, it was clearly a lamentation about the loss of God and us as a society destroying God rather than some sort of jubilation over the fact that God does not exist. And trying to misrepresent it, as so many apologists do on such a regular basis, is nothing more than a dishonest card trick. I honestly do not understand how he thinks that this can be compelling to anybody besides his base audience that already agrees with him in lockstep. Now, furthermore, Nietzsche himself did not start the concept of the death of God. That was already around from Hegel as a result of his book, The Phenomenology of Spirit, and even he himself was not the originator of it. He was just one of the more famous philosophers that discussed the demise of God as a result of the scientific Enlightenment. Nietzsche probably said it most clearly, and is the one most widely referenced in regards to it, but he was not a quote-unquote strong atheist. Nietzsche wasn't a strong, robust atheist, as you like to put it. He talked about the demise of God as being something quite terrifying, not as something that he was relishing in. And trying to represent it differently is just dishonest. Not to mention that you just happened to bring up the fact that he wrote a book called The Antichrist, and yet don't even mention anything about what the book is about. Juxtaposition of the character of Christ versus the character of the church in the time in which Nietzsche was writing. And trying to compare the two as though he was writing a book that was about the Antichrist, in your terminology, like the next coming of Satan, is again nothing more than pure dishonesty and really doesn't help your case. But it does make you really fun to laugh at. So I'm sorry. I mean, you seem like a very passionate guy, and I'm not trying to make fun. No, I am trying to make fun of you. But I'm not trying to make fun of you out of spite. I'm making fun of your commentary because it is so fundamentally backwards that if I wasn't laughing at it, I'd be crying. So, no, I wouldn't be crying. I'd be strangling a cat. So, Okay, well, let's keep going and see where this batshit leads us.
Okay, have that. That's easy to refute. Nietzsche, though, he brought forth a powerful, stern approach to his atheism and argued for it. Nietzsche said this: what is evil? Whatever springs from weakness. Then he says, what is good? Whatever augments a feeling of power, the will to power, power itself in man. That's what Nietzsche said. And he said that the weakness and the blight of Christianity is helping the poor and the weak and the needy. He said that was wrong.
So I'll have to look more specifically at where you got these quotes that you're trying to use about how Nietzsche interpreted Christianity, but I can say right from the outset that it's absolutely dishonest, at the very least. When Nietzsche criticizes Christianity, he's never been critical of Jesus. And when he's critical of the church, and when Nietzsche is critical of the Christian church, he's not critical of it for it being too compassionate or too loving towards the meek and those that need help. If anything, he's far more critical of the priestly class and the general hypocrisy of the church compared to the life of Jesus. You can quote my Nietzsche all you want and try and misrepresent what he's talking about, but particularly his book, The Will to Power, or The Genealogy of Morals, and The Antichrist, he talks very consistently about the dangers of this will to power form of morality, both within Christianity and within society. Now, furthermore, the fact remains that due to his mental issues later on in life, much of the work that we got from Nietzsche came from his sister, not from the man himself. She collated and combined his work to be able to create the publications that became very popular. However, there is a lot of question as to how accurate to the original writings a lot of that commentary is. Nietzsche is, again, one of the more complex and obfuscating philosophers that you can approach. So it's really easy to quote mine him and take him in a certain context that may or may not be out of context. But trying to show his disdain for the church as a disdain for the compassion inside of the church is fundamentally dishonest and really, again, isn't helping your case. But it gets even worse from here. So let's continue.
And of course, he needed help late in his life when he thought that he was Jesus Christ because he was ill with syphilis. He declared himself Jesus Christ the last few years of his life. So much for his atheism.
He can't go more than about 15 seconds without lying through his teeth. Now, I will grant the concession that there was a lot of speculation that syphilis was what drove Nietzsche mad. However, based on our understanding of the progression of syphilis and his specific mannerisms during his later years, it's very clear that what mental issues he was dealing with did not come from syphilis. More than likely, it came from a brain tumor. However, in either case, yes, he had lost his mind, but no, he probably didn't lose his mind due to syphilis, because syphilis tends to kill a person in anywhere from 11 to 24 months after they reach the tertiary stage of the infection. Nietzsche lived for another decade. So yeah, there was definitely something going on with him mentally, but it more than likely wasn't syphilis. They tried to label it as syphilis because at the time, it was the closest thing that they could get to explaining his insanity at that point in his life. However, examining his behaviors, his mannerisms, and his slow mental degeneration over time gives a much stronger indication that he was dealing with something along the lines of a brain tumor or some other kind of cognitive impairment rather than syphilis. Link below, you'll see a document discussing why in more recent years it's been more widely accepted that he was dealing with something very different from syphilis and the reasons why he was given the syphilis diagnosis in the first place, and yet how inaccurate that was in terms of addressing his particular mental instabilities. Not only that, that's not something that you can find in any of his letters when he had lost his mind. He did imply that he might have been the crucified one, but he also implied that he might have been Dionysus. So trying to say that he lost his atheism because he lost his mind is, again, doing nothing but shitting on the character to try and fit your narrative. It really doesn't work for anybody that's not already in your camp and standing by you in terms of their position from the outset. Because anybody else looking at it from an outsider's perspective is going to know that you're absolutely and utterly full of shit.
So Nietzsche was an Antichrist. He was an atheist. No longer is an atheist because now he's dead, and so he knows for sure that God exists.
Okay, so what the hell are you talking about here? So Nietzsche was an atheist and he was an Antichrist? Like, again, are you referring to the biblical Antichrist, or are you talking about the fact that he considered himself anti-Christian and therefore more Christ-like than the church was at that point in time? Because that's what he was referring to in the Antichrist. Not whatever the hell you're trying to refer to it here now. As far as the latter, about him just burning in hell right now because now he knows that God is real, seriously, fuck you. That's all I can say. It's the same as saying that Hawking is burning in hell, or that Feynman is burning in hell, or any other non-believer is burning in hell for eternity just because they didn't believe in your particular fairy tale. Now, from here, I'm sure that you're going to be going into a broad sweep of just bad apologetics that you're going to gish gallop right through. But the fact of the matter remains that making assertions like that doesn't help you with anything other than making yourself look like a disingenuous, mean-spirited, nasty human being who doesn't deserve any kind of respect whatsoever. It's hard to be able to be very Christian towards a person like yourself when you are such a hypocrite to what Christ was trying to do during his lifetime. So on so many levels, all I can say is fuck you, you dishonest, disingenuous, disrespectful, imbecilic piece of human excrement.
So within this video and within our ministry, we try to provide and demonstrate the certainty of God's existence. Spiritual certainty, mental certainty, as well as psychological certitude, rational assurance, and logical certitude.
And yet with all of your assertions of certitude that you're trying to provide, you have yet to provide a single shred of evidence to support your claims. Not to mention the fact that when you're trying to break down and argue against the null hypothesis of atheism, you can't even be honest in what you're trying to refute, and instead have to strawman it as much as humanly possible and disparage the character that you're referring to as much as humanly possible, just to make yourself sound better, which not only doesn't help your case and is very unchristian of you, it really makes you come across as an asshole, and any certitudes that you can assert sound like they're coming directly from your ass.
That's what we try to do. That's what we aim to do, and we have hundreds and hundreds of videos on that, including this program today. See, nobody in their right mind has enough blind faith to believe, to honestly believe that order came from disorder, that uniformity came from the accidental, that intelligence came from non-intelligence. I mean, nobody has enough blind faith to believe that. That design came from chaos. That personality came from non-personality. That love came from just hard matter. That something came from nothing, or as some of the new atheists say, everything came from nothing. Nobody has enough blind faith to really hold that. It's silly. It's a bad idea to even try to hold that idea that everything came from nothing.
Gish galloping right through, I see. Now, I could go into each one of these piece by piece and try and show how disingenuous the false dichotomy is that he's trying to represent, but the fact of the matter is that he presented absolutely no evidence for the proclamations that he's making here. All it is nothing but baseless assertions, and it's creating a dichotomy of things that nobody talks about in the scientific realm, not to mention the fact that he proclaims this as blind faith. What most skeptical people have as the basis of their quote-unquote faith is not blind. They have confidence proportional to the evidence that they see demonstrated to them. With any one of those, we could discuss specifically why it is that intelligence came from non-intelligence, or why life came from non-life, how what you call love came from nothing but hard matter. Again, these dichotomies are not something that anybody in their right mind talks about unless they're trying to create a bullshit claim for their fake apologetics. More important than that, though, when you keep on making this assertion that atheists claim that everything or something came from nothing, I can't think of a single atheist that makes that proclamation. The only people that seem to make that proclamation are apologists and theists trying to misrepresent what non-believers are saying and what the scientific community is saying when they discuss matters of nothing. Because in the realm of physics, nothing is a very different thing than ex nihilo in the philosophical sense, and trying to conflate the two does nothing to help your case. So truly, if you want to make a case, first off, back up your assertions. Second off, try and actually have your assertions make a goddamn single bit of sense, because so far, they really haven't done that. And hell, we're not even 3 minutes in. Holy fuck. There's no way I'm going to get through all of this. Let's see how much more I can do before I really, really desire to strangle a kitten or drink a bottle of vodka. Because it's coming. It's coming.
And of course, the DNA code. How can a code come without a code giver?
It's not a code. It's a sequence, a macromolecule that is developed to its length over time. If you want to ask a question like this, why not ask, how are there snowflakes without a snowflake builder? Complexity does not mean design, and the development of the complexity within the DNA structure of every one of our cells did not happen with precise and specific programming. If you had a computer program with as much ancillary and unnecessary sequencing as our genetic code, or say the genetic code of an onion, nobody would buy it, because it would be a terrible, terrible engineering flop, to say the least. The very nature of how DNA develops and how genetics change over time indicates very clearly that it is not a design structure, that it happens to develop through random mutation and natural selection. I understand that you don't understand how biology works, or most of science in general, but when you try and make a bold assertion that runs straight into the face of everything that we understand based on the evidence that we have in front of us, it really doesn't help your case. Oh, and also, just to point it out, everything that you've said so far has absolutely nothing to do with atheism. This should be obvious, but apparently it's not to you. Atheism is a lack of belief in God, not the assertion that God does not exist, and not assertions about what came from nothing, nothing about Big Bang cosmology, evolution, abiogenesis, or any of the other several dozen things that you just gish gallop through. None of those have anything to do with the singular aspect that the term atheist deals with, which is a lack of belief in God. Why the hell is this so hard? Oh, right. Dishonesty. That tends to be what causes such angry, hypocritical non sequiturs as the basis and foundation of a person's arguments, you know. I mean, if the guy was honest or had even a slight shred of integrity, he'd be able to actually stay on topic. But no. I mean, how else is he going to pad this out to 19 minutes? Yeah, and on that, no way in hell I'm going to be able to get through all 19 minutes of this without some sort of severe intoxication.
It seems impossible. So Romans 1 tells us that atheists know that God exists, but they suppress the truth and unrighteousness. They see all this evidence, they see all the proof, but they deny, and they suppress and suppress and suppress. How is it? It's like this guy. Say there's a black guy who's a racist, but he says, oh no, I'm not a racist. Just like the atheist says, no, there's no proof for God.
Holy shit. Really, what the hell is this? No, not going to do it. I'm fast forwarding through this. I can't put up with this kind of ignorant bullshit.
And atheists know that God exists. Why? Look how moral they are. Many atheists are super in their morality. They're wonderful moral people. Why? Because they know that God exists. Even though they suppress it, they know that God exists, including his moral law. And so they try to be good people. They try to do these things in their lives because they know that God exists.
Doesn't the 9th commandment tell you not to bear false witness? So why are you being this dishonest about a concept that you do not understand and asserting it without any evidence whatsoever? Your God is not the source of morality. You may think it is, and you can proclaim that it is, but considering that morality, ethics, and general decency of human behavior long precedes your fairy tale, clearly indicates to anybody who wants to look that you are lying through your teeth. If you want to claim that everybody is adhering to God's moral law, then I've just got to ask, is it the part of infanticide that God seems to condone? Or how about the use of concubines, the acceptance of rape, honor killing? Which ones are these? Because quite frankly, if I was trying to abide by God's moral law, or rather your God's moral law, I would be a sick, sick individual. So please do not push your barbaric little monster, your bullshit little parasitic, sociopathic, passive-aggressive, manipulative, genocidal, homicidal, evil monster as the source of our morality. Because that's the thing. No matter how an atheist gets their morals, the morality overall is almost always going to be better than the morality proclaimed in your fairy tale. It's as simple as that.
Now, even when they try to declare and assert and prove and demonstrate that God doesn't exist, they have to utilize God's logic. So just like that guy that was a racist who said no, his actions betray what he really believes. When the atheist uses God's logic, when the atheist uses God's morality, they're declaring that they know that God exists.
We don't use God's logic. It's as simple as that. Our logic and our ability to reason long predates your fairy tale. Not only that, our logic, our deductive reasoning, our ability to observe and interpret evidence contradicts the so-called logic that your God proclaims through his divinely inspired word. I mean, this is almost as bad as the moral argument, but it does a far better job at showing your absolute and utter ignorance of both history and a basic comprehension of logic, reasoning, and deductive arguments.
So there's numerous arguments for the existence of God. I'll just cover a few really quickly here, then we'll try to give an exposition on 2 or 3 of them and see if you can understand them. We see the argument for mathematics, powerful argument. You can see that in my book called Fake Atheism on Amazon. I discuss countless arguments in that book, Fake Atheism on Amazon.
I believe it was Christ that said that avarice is the root of all evil. So nice job there hawking your crap book that, if this is any indication of, provides nothing but hollow, meaningless, irrelevant arguments without actually backing them up with any degree of integrity, insight, or evidence. But hey, why not? Now, with your argument from, quote, mathematics specifically, A, our understanding of mathematics predates your God, just like all the other stuff that you brought up so far, and B, mathematics is a construct that we developed as a species for the things that we observe in the universe around us. Mathematics isn't some thing out there that's outside of our consciousness to extrapolate information based on the evidence that we have and are able to observe. Now, again, if this comes from your God, then why is it that we had it before your God was ever around? And why is it that other places in far separate places in the world developed a very thorough understanding of mathematics long before your God was ever on the scene? In places where gods were not necessarily interpreted or used in any way, shape, or form. Then again, I'm trying to give you too much credit. These are things that you genuinely don't care about making solid solid arguments for. You're much more interested in simply preaching to your choir, rushing through a lot of things without backing it up with evidence, and trying to get some money for your terrible books and your dishonest, manipulative, deceptive, quote-unquote, ministry. If you want to proclaim yourself a Christian and start playing this apologetic game, you might want to start by abiding by the ethics, decency, and basic morality that you proclaim your God provides. Because so far I haven't seen any of it. All I've seen is a person lying through his teeth over and over and over again. But you know, you're lying for Jesus, so that makes the lies okay, right?
Also, Rader's modal tag, very powerful arguments. Also, the argument from propositions, the argument from truth. That one I'm going to try to cover today. The argument from truth. Also, the transcendental argument for logic. The evidential argument for the resurrection of Christ. The evidential argument from messianic prophecies. The evidential argument for the uniqueness of Christ, that nobody's like Jesus. Nobody loved like him. Nobody ever died on the cross like he did for us. Nobody ever spoke like him. Nobody ever died and rose again on the third day like he did. This is Jesus.
So essentially the argument from my fairy tale is the bestest fairy tale. Yeah. That's it. I can't deal with any more of this. If I keep on listening to this guy, I'm going to end up killing a kitten, or maybe, you know, skewering and spit roasting a baby. You know, because I'm an atheist, so it's easy for me to do, because God isn't looking over my shoulder. Anyways, this is disgusting. Really, really quite sad, too. Apologetics in general tends to be a very dishonest, disingenuous, and deceptive form of reasoning and argument. But this guy, so far, I mean, he's definitely comparable to a Sci-10 Bruggencate or a Matt Slick or any of the other duplicitous, manipulative liars that call themselves apologists. And you wonder why we don't get persuaded by your arguments. Maybe, first off, come up with better arguments, and second off, start acting with a remote sense of basic human decency and morality instead of lying through your teeth every 15 seconds when you're trying to make your apologetics arguments, because that doesn't help you. I know that you say that we get our morals from your God, but again, you say that without any evidence or any way of demonstrating it whatsoever. And even if it did come from your God, we seem to abide by it better than you do. Thank you for listening to Godless Recovery. I appreciate any feedback you want to offer, positive or negative, and I guess I'll see you next time.